Good morning. Thank you for the participants for today, the ones that join us this series of presentations. And you know that we wanted to be connected with the nursery growers in some way and choosing a title or topic for each month. Um, these classes, we were granted one recertification credit for each of the hours we're presenting. And yeah, so today we're going to talk about common foliar diseases of ornamentals. I thought this would be an interesting topic, on the fact that we need to sell our plants and they have to look pretty, right? That's our concern. Okay, so for the people, I think all the people that are here today know me. They know my name is Luisa Santa Maria, and I will be presenting this hour. And also Maria, my faculty research assistant, will join in some of the slides we're presenting today. Okay, let's start because I have a long list of diseases that I want to talk about or show you or remind you. And actually, I would like to know at the end if I missed some important disease. To me, it was kind of, talking about diseases, the importance of them is just the aesthetic part of the plant, but also tell us um, how the plant it is. There are some pathogens that are specifically or target just the foliar or the aerial part of the plant. And those are the ones that I'm going to refer today in the examples that I'm going to show you. Of course, so all the foliar diseases could be caused for different reasons, right? And the main thing are microorganisms that could be fungal diseases, could be in some other biotic factors like insects that are moving, there are vectors moving diseases, or even themselves causing damage in the leaves of the plants, like nematodes or other kind of larvae of insects. And also we need to consider, don't forget about these abiotic factors that sometimes confuse us and make us think that maybe this is a disease. Yes, but not. Sometimes, and it's clear to me now with, for all of you, I guess, too, when you see something in the leaves, most of them sometimes is caused by environmental conditions, sun or winter damage, things like that. Even when we have wildfire smoke, that could cause a problem to our plants too. And these foliar diseases, as I said, sometimes the most concerning thing is the aesthetic damage of the plant. We cannot sell them, they are not sellable. But the worst thing is when they die because of that. And we are going to talk about those. Well, let's try to recognize the signs and symptoms first. This is something we have done previously with other things, but one of the things when we look for in lesions of the aerial part of the plant are these spots, right? And they could be different. They can be completely different in each case, but at the same time, they are the same liver spots. But one of the things we pay attention sometimes is the shape of the lesions, if they are angular or not, if they are irregular, or if they are water soft lesions. So some that help us for the initial diagnostic of the disease. One of the main things is we see chlorosis. That means plants are they're not, something is not correct. We can see necrotic lesions, is the bed of the tissue. Sometimes they are dry. Most of them are caused by fungal microorganisms. And this in the right is just environmental damage, sunburn. But chlorotic leaf spots could be another thing to pay attention and concern. One of the leaf symptoms that I really like because I think it's easier to recognize a problem is when we have virus. These mosaic chlorotic areas kind of really easy to identify that the virus is related with that problem. other tomatoes spotted with white virus, for example. They have some ring patterns or nice patterns, actually. And the other thing that we need to remember is that the signs that we always call, that is the expression of the pathogen infecting the plant. And that could be seen with mycelium. If you have a hand lens, you can see even spores. Or if there is a bacteria, you can see ooze coming out from this tongue or the some cankers. So those are the presence of the pathogens, and those are more specific things we can see and identify as a problem. Well, we reviewed that briefly. Now let's go to see the diseases, foliar diseases. Since you are there, please feel free to make any comments so I can learn from you too. Like eventually there are other holes that I'm not mentioning and maybe you know, and I can add to the list. So let's make this interactive in some way. Mm. I don't have all the knowledge, and you are there looking at things. So I have organized these by common different groups. What are the cause of the pathogen that cause these leaf problems? So the first group I'm going to mention are the fungal foliar diseases that are the true fungi. That means they are the fungals that produce mycelium. They have spores, and they have, some of them could be complex disease cycles, but in general, this could be a disease cycle of a fungi, a fungal pathogen. Some of them, well, when plant is infected, they can reproduce, multiply vegetatively, they can produce spores and overwinter structures, some of them, or most of them, they can survive, and they develop structures we know as, these are sporophores, the ones they have the receptacle for spores. This could be dispersal, so each organism have different ways. Some spores could be dispersed with the wind, with the rain, with the splash water. So there are several ways that they can disperse, and after that we can move, we can help to disperse with our shoes or activities we do in the farm, and then these spores land in the right holes and infected. So kind of a summary, what will be a normal cycle of the fungal disease. At the right, could you guess what kind of a spore is that one? Guess. To me, it's one of those, these spores from a pathogen, to me, one of the most beautiful. Most of them are different of species to species, but all of them have ornaments like that. Guess? Somebody guess? If you were present, I can give you a chocolate or something. Well, this is the spore of powder mildew. So those are the most beautiful spores, let's say that way. Okay, let's go to the main group of these foliar diseases. We know anthracnose, we say anthracnose, but anthracnose is just the term to refer to these diseases that have leaf spots, lesions that are irregular. It could be from brown color to blotches or blotches of leaves. Sometimes could cause distortion or curling in the leaves. The lesions can start as one, like a small dark spots, but then they keep growing and can just coalesce to form a large spore. And at the end, all this tissue will be damaged and will be necrotic. And definitely, these, one of the kind of characteristics of anthracnose is that all, as you see here, they don't have any definitely form. Everything is irregular lesions. Most of these symptoms are it start in the lower leaves, especially around the margins. If the disease could even spread, can attack, not attack, but can localize in the base of the twigs, and sometimes could form cankers. One of the most common causes host for these diseases, dogwood, oak, but those are different species of pathogens affecting this anthracnose disease and this species. And like a case of dogwood, anthracnose even could attack the bracteae of the flowers. Um, Most of the symptoms are present during the springtime with cool and wet conditions. In the case of dogwood, there are some genus that are more susceptible to anthracnose than others. There are some species that could be even resistant to that, just to mention something about that. Here's some examples of other hosts that are affected by these uh, type of pathogens. As here we have a list. I already mentioned oak, maples, walnuts, buckeyes, good and dogwoods. Here's some is a picture of peonies with some lesions in the leaves, but also affecting here part of the stem. And here's another picture of the really advanced damage caused by Alternaria in dogwood. Here, another thing is ash and maple. One of the things that you can notice in these pictures is how the lesions start. You can see in the borders, or in the case of the maple here in the center, and you see how it grows. And it's basically when the water has stand. So leaf wetness definitely will favor the development of the infection of the penetration of the spores. So when the water is standing, sometimes it's in the border of the leaves, or in the case, like depending of the form of the shape of the leaves. The other group that are really well known for foliar is Cercospora. I think you are familiar with this pathogen, Cercospora hydrangea. I'm going to give just this example. In the hydrangea plants, we usually see these sometimes when we have periods of rain, or when most we have overhead irrigation and the pathogen is present and we have the right conditions, kind of warm, high humidity and rain. So spring is a good time, or after spring, but sometimes could stay until the fall. As I said, these spots could start like small spots, but they are growing and they can coalesce again. Some of these leaf spots could kind of have some angular spots, so kind of different, but the interesting or important thing to maybe pay attention in this is they are not producing, the lesions are dry like a formed necrotic tissues. So they can start as in the bottom of the plant and it's going to spread up to the plant, and usually the young leaves are the most easy to get infected. Botrytis, and that is something also that it is common and specific for the aerial part of the plant. Well, we know that is known as a gray mold and affect and literally any plant, but a variety of ornamental plants for sure, especially those that are grown on humid or relative humid conditions and greenhouses, where the temperature and humidity could be higher than outside. So outside is hard to see botrytis, but inside the greenhouses is where we can see more often this pathogen. They produce lesions, water soak, then at the end, plants will lose the leaves and will weakness the plant anyway. And most of the important thing with this pathogen that is kind of a I can say opportunistic pathogen is it change or could damage the syllable of the plants, yet right? They can attack or affect also the flowers, the flowers, and then it will be hard to sell those kind of plants. Uh, Among the symptoms, we have that mycelium that is really easy to recognize, right? Discolored leaves and or flowers. As I said, wet or humid conditions are ideal for growth. But let me tell you, we have done some experiments in the greenhouse and didn't grow. Right, Maria? we have
That's
had
right.
we inoculate more and that give a lot of humidity. So it is one that we know how is the biology. Yeah, that was interesting once. We had to inoculate again to get this disease going on in our experiment. Anyway, these are some pictures here of the disease. These the botrytis. So one of the interesting in botrytis is they can produce some kind of sclerosis. So even in vitro, or here's this is a good picture showing some of the sclerosis. Those are the survival structures of these pathogens. So it could stay there for some long time until the right host and right conditions show up. Okay, Potinia leaf spot. This is a kind of interesting disease that I like in some way. Why? Because I had a call from one of the neighbors close to the station saying that their plants are dying. And I went to check at those. And to be honest, I was thinking, oh, I'm not familiar with this disease at the beginning. But then I didn't, I just saw the tree without leaves and not many symptoms. But then I was looking at other trees and I found this. So this Puccinia leaf spot has this kind of red-brown spots on the leaf. The plant start to lose the leaves and, weakness, the plant in general. It could be a long process to kill slowly the plant, let's say that way. So the foliation will be in extreme conditions. So when I went to look at these trees, they were like sad like this, and they were sad. The owners were sad because they were saying they have seen the process for a long time, but the problem was they called me when was almost dead. So what we can do at that time, right? But that's one of the reasons I put this, because it's becoming like endemic there. Like all the plants, all these Potinia plants in that neighborhood were in the same conditions, but they didn't do much. So they were kind of thinking, okay, we're gonna replace them. So I don't know, I need to go and check again. And well, it seems like rain or continuous irrigation could cause this damage. And there are other plants from the Rosacea family that could have the same pathogen, infected with the same pathogen. All right, like pear, flower, and queen's fire thorns. Here, favorite disease, right? Volutella blight. I think should be there. Actually, this is what I would consider another opportunistic pathogen, the foliar mm, parts of the plant in boxes. We know that, we recognize that is these signs are easy to see if they are infected. And as I mentioned sometime, this pathogen, it takes advantage when the plant is weak. It's definitely, and it could be more than one disease in the plant. If the plant has problems with Phytophthora, definitely you will see Volutella present also. And this is prevalent. You can see it when it's when wet and humid conditions, definitely. Here, some areas. Did I miss some? I think so. No. Oh, this is okay. Another picture about Utella, like showing part of the foliage. The interesting thing is the leaves don't fall. That is one of the things that you recognize or you differentiate. But I think the signs of this pathogen, it's kind of easy to recognize to me. We have the famous boxwood blight, right? We have talked about that. We even have one class just to talk about all the diseases about boxwood, but specifically focus in these boxwood blight. And as I said, well, it is characteristic to have concentric lesions that go from light brown to dark brown, and the same thing, they can coalesce after growing of the disease progress, and also you can see part of the stems infected, and there are some specific features or growth of these lesions that help us to do the diagnostic of this pathogen. And as I said, since we are talking about the foliar pathogens, this is one that's specific for the aerial part of the plant, since only the leaves and stems are attacked by the pathogen, never the root system. I wanted to look for some disease related with monocots of these perennial plants that have bulbs, or I don't know, iris, I don't know what other ones, daylily. This is one of the cases I went to visit a farm and they didn't know what it was, but it was kind of super interesting to me, and I just wanted to share now. So this elongate yellow streak along the leaf in the mid vein. So it is fascinating how it is spread in nice way, and just because of the presence of the leaf wetness. So the plant just could show some lesions in the bottom, and then you can see how, because of the way the irrigation and the splash, all the plants were infected. Yeah, so that is interesting in this kind of plants with that structure. And you can keep the pathogen there for a long time if you don't do some management practices to, to prevent in the future. I don't know. Right now, we're not talking about management practices. We're talking about the diseases related with leaves. um, Now, the short haul, that is another interesting pathogen. When I arrived here, that was the main thing. Several workers asked me, what can we do with the short haul? Oh, okay, let me show what is that one. That was for 13 years ago. And that was interesting. So this is a pathogen, well, it is identified as a fungus, but I was reading in some place, I don't remember the source of some exactly, but could be caused by a bacteria too. In some species, the bacteria that start producing the sock lesions, and the fungus grow around the lesion, using what the bacteria is releasing, and then the fungus grow around the lesion, and that is the reason the tissue fall, because bacteria die because cannot grow because the fungus was growing around and it fall. But that is one case. I don't know it's all the time, but the literature said that is these fungus especially that start with some lesions, dark lesions, and then the tissue die and then fall. But what fall in that specific and nice shape? That was my interest, right? And I think I like and I understand it has some logical thinking that the bacteria start that produce, working, degrading the material, and the fungus taking advantage of that, growing around, kill the bacteria and kill itself. And that's the reason the tissue drop. I like that. So these calls are the result of that. Because in the other diseases, for fungal diseases, the same thing. They have the lesions, right, necrotic tissue, but that doesn't happen, that fall in that beautiful shape of brown thing. So just think about it. And if I find the right reference, I will share with you. The black spotted roses, that is another interesting disease that is common for all the diseases and for all the roses planted, right? The disease don't kill the plant, but over time, it weakens the plant because they lose too much leaves that make it hard for the plant to survive. For example, yeah, so that less photosynthesis, of course, with less leaves. So that is one of the things that this disease could do in long term. It's interesting that the disease is active during cool moisture weather, but during the control, well, I don't know, upside, during extreme summer heat during July and August, the growth of these disease is not, is limited. What we see, these black spots. I have that in my roses, in one of my roses, and it grows in the upper surface of the leaves. And around we see some yellowing, and usually you can see at the bottom of the plant and it's going up to the rest of the plant. Best thing to do, just prune and get rid of the inoculum in some way, and some preventive later. Sometimes it could overwinter in the cane. That is something we need to pay attention. All the spores could germinate during the spring, and that is the way that disseminate and splash to the rest of the leaves in the plant. Powdery mildew, oh, this is interesting. So powdery mildew is this growth of mycelium like a blast. There are different powder mildew species, so in general, that cause different symptoms. But one of the important things is host specific. So whatever is the pathogen that attack one species, that will be just for oaks or for any other species, will be specific for them. These powder mildew are one of those fungi that we call biotroph. That means we cannot cultivate at all. They need the plant to survive. As I said, that these fungi tend to infect the plants of the same family or genus. So family specific. So there are some species that are really more susceptible than others. And roses, it seems like, are susceptible for everything. And one good example for a good susceptible host. That's the reason they're trying to make a lot of hybrids, right? Here's some graphics of powder mildew in different tissues. So as I said, they have to have a plant tissue in order to grow, reproduce, and survive. We cannot do anything else. So we cannot try to grow or do something. And if we want to do an experiment, we have to rely in the environment and the presence in the environment to get infected plants. So, okay, so that's, but there are people doing research in that, that's for sure. The one example here is the Sphaerotheca, is the genus related with roses. And as I said, the signs will be this white and powdery mycelium and spores that form under the leaves, under the surface. And of course, usually will affect new foliage, but also old foliage could be affected for that. In some cases, new growth could be distorted and covered with this white powdery growth. What happened with the leaves that are infected, they usually will die and fold. So you can see some defoliation too, and that is the risk there. Well, pathogen will survive in the tissue, so it will be important to clean all these plant debris. And usually that's what they do with roses, but I don't know the other species of plants. Here are other examples, how you can see the symptoms of powdery in, like in dogwood, in rhododendron, and some magnolia. So symptoms could be kind of little different kind of lesions with powdery. It depends on the species that you are seeing. Have you seen those? I don't know if this part you're gonna talk, or is still my part, Maria? Still my
Still yours.
Okay. So these foliar diseases, the second group, so we have talked the real fungi, as I said, we're talking now about the fungal-like microorganisms. So we have this classification that they are looking like a fungi, but there are some characteristics that are specific for these oomycetes. In this group, we have several orders, but one of those is the peronospora, or that represent downy mildew. So I think we are familiar with downy mildew, mainly in patients and roses have been in the ornamental group, have been more problematic with this disease. And if you remember, maybe 10 years ago, we had this outbreak of downy mildew in patients. Walleriana, I think was the species that was super susceptible and the most common in patients used to put in the landscape. And that was so cool, so interesting to look for the disease at that time. Well, what we see is the leaves, is the fungus start to produce some mycelium underneath of the leaf, and then the leaves become the color chlorotic and yellow, and then at the end they fall. And here, let me see. Okay, here some of other symptoms in other hosts like Alison, snapdragon, and here, what is this one? I don't see the name exactly. And yeah, and you can see how they grow. But here, let's see how it works. How is the cycle of this? This is what is interesting, and how can we break the disease cycle? And as well, here we have the downy mildew, then the spores can move and infect all the plants. The plants start to lose the leaves. And the interesting thing is the upper part of the plant looks nice with flowers even. It's the last part that collapse. But all the leaves in the stems, they fall. And then finally, the plant collapses completely when it loses all the leaves. What happened there is when that is going on, some structures called all spores or some overwinter or structures start to form by the fungus, by this downy mildew, and then it stays in the soil for several years. Then the following year, so where this place in this landscape, they used to plant the same plant in the same place again and again, the disease. So the way that have break this cycle was just changing the crop, putting different plants. And now I think there are some species of impatiens that are resistant to downy mildew. Well, let's talk about another oomycete, and we know Phytophthora for sure, but we know very well about the Phytophthora ramorum, right? The thought of the disease. And this pathogen is one of the mainly foliar pathogen in the group of the Phytophthora species. So Ramoro also he loves all the plants, has a huge range of of host. That is the other problem. And it's tolerant to heat and drought and prefer cool and wet weather. So we provide this pathogen the best condition in our nursery systems, and because we have all the plants that this pathogen likes, to be honest. There's more than 140 species that could be a great host for this pathogen. And symptoms sometimes could be similar to sunburn, so can be confusing, but no, you cannot confuse that. And the symptoms, lesions start in both sides of the leaves, so sometimes in the border where the water stay, and some moment that leaf collapse, and when the stem is also attacked and break. All right, and since we're talking about Ramoran, I was writing something about Pyrus, and Pyrus is also one of the species that we produce in our nursery environment, and that could be affected by Ramoran, and the leaves turn. This was one picture that I took in some small nursery. And I don't know what it definitely it has Phytophthora, but I hope it didn't have Ramor. I just took the picture and I was sure that was my doctor, but looking at that right now, it's just okay. Leaves are dark brown and produce should die back. These plants had that. Young shots and leaves of pyres are very susceptible for infection. Other good hosts for these Ramor would be Bagbornon, Syringa, and Camellia as ornamental host. Okay, let's talk about other fungal, foliar fungal disease that is really interesting group. And I think I'm gonna let Maria talk about them. Is that
All right.
okay, please? Okay.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Next slide. I guess we can just keep your presentation sharing if you don't mind switching the slides. Okay. So the first one is leaf rust, and oh, thank you. This is one of my favorites. There's over 8,000 named species of rust across multiple different families. And some of them are really complex. In fact, some have 5 different spore stages, which is just amazing. And they are mostly found during wet, humid weather in the spring and in the summer. Now, depending on the host, you're going to have different signs and symptoms, but the vast majority of rust are going to produce these orange little spots on the bottom of the leaves. And these are just spots, and they contain massive amounts of spores. And you will be able to see some symptoms as well. In some species, these spots will actually also show up on the top of the leaf, and they won't be spores, but you're going to start to see that the leaf's going to turn a yellow color. And then if you flip it over, that's when you see all the spores on the underside. And some lesions could form as well. In severe cases, you're also going to see defoliation, and leaves can become distorted as well. Next. Yes, please. All right. So with all those different species, we're of course going to have a huge range for the ornamental plants. And here's just a couple examples of rust in the roses, the rhododendron, and these two specifically, you can see a lot of orange pustules on the underside. Snapdragon, they're depending on the spore stage that the fungus is currently producing. There could be darker colors. So here we have a darker color, it's a different spore. But for the most part, there's going to be like an orangish brown spots on the underside of the leaf. All right, next slide. So juniper tip blight is produced by 2 different types of fungi, actually, and they cause very similar signs and symptoms. So we just sort of lump them together. And what happens is you're going to start seeing that the needles are going to turn brown, and there's going to be dieback at the tips of the branches, because the fungus is actually growing in the stem as well and girdling the branches, which is going to, of course, kill it. So it's going to start showing up in February and March. And you might start seeing symptoms there, but it really picks up pace over the summer. So you definitely will start to see damage as the summer progresses. And defoliation will occur in the late spring, early summer. And like I mentioned, you might even be able to see the stem cankers that are causing the tip dieback. Next. Please. Thank you. As far as signs for this one, you might be able to see small black fruiting bodies if you look carefully at the tips that have died. And these are the main sign that's produced by these 2 fungi. And in the late fall, what's going to happen is the spores will then be released and infect more branches. And they will especially fall on lower branches or anything that's damaged. That's going to be extra susceptible. Like a lot of fungi, the disease is going to be severe and more severe in wet and humid weather. And sadly, that's, nurseries provide great environment for that. So something to be aware of if you grow junipers. And finally, young plants less than 5 years old tend to be more severely damaged than older plants. Next, I think that's it for this section, maybe.
Okay. You want me to follow? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we cannot miss virus problems, right? And as I said, um, well, as a good pathologist, I like some pathogens, right? And virus is kind of unique in order to see symptoms in the foliar area. So um, as we know, viruses need a host in order to grow or replicate. Um, and also they infect the plants slowly. But the important thing is they cannot go inside by themselves. They need some way to go there inside the plant. So insects are mainly the main way to move or spread the plant to plant. So we call these vectors, right? Um, some of the symptoms caused by virus sometimes can confuse us in some way because that looks like are symptoms caused by some insects or other pests. And symptoms could be different between among the different plants that are attacked or infected by virus. We're going to show some few examples of this virus. Like as I said, they could form some specific patterns, mosaics or necrotic liver spots. Here one example in dahlia. This could be common during the dry spring where insect vectors are really going around the place. Could be there. All right. Here an example of tomato mosaic virus in peonies. I haven't seen personally any virus in peonies, to be honest. It's just some reference we found how could be the pattern of the virus in peony plants. Cucumber mosaic virus, whether this not only produce damage in the leaves, but also produce additional symptoms, like most of the viruses, like stunting of the plants. Sometimes they could produce distortion of the leaves, curling, things like that. But in the case of the cucumber mosaic virus, we can find some ring spots on the leaves and also some color, flower color breaking. These cucumber mosaic viruses and the cucumbers, of course, but also we can find all in ornamental plants such gladiolos, petunias, impatiens, and lilies. Tobacco mosaic virus. That is a nice virus, right? It affects many crops, and the main symptoms are leaf yellowing, necrotic liver spots, mosaic symptoms, stunting, curling. And well, this is one of the virus that we can move mechanically. They can be in our hands if we touch plants infected, and we can move, so we can be the vector. That would be the way to say. So we need to be careful with all these virus disease anyways, because we can move them in our hands too. And if there's some opening in the plants or cut plants, we can move the virus to the plants. Here's some pictures, the ornamentals that show some symptoms of the tobacco mosaic virus, like these yellowing modding on leaves or necrotic lesions in petunia. So chrysanthemums, geraniums, begonias are really great hosts for these. There are some nurseries that produce vegetables, starters, and they have also ornamentals. So they need to be careful not to move to the ornamental plants if they are producing starters with vegetables. So that could be a way to move these microorganisms, or these virus particles, to other crops. I wanted to mention here one more disease that I think we don't have in the West Coast. I hope so. Tell me that I'm wrong, please. Rose rosette disease. This is a disease that really concerned, even there was a big run about rose rosette a few years ago, to find ways to identify faster these organisms. And what it caused, the main cause was Rosa multiflora. So that is not a rose that has been, it's not any hybrid, it's more a common rose. I don't know, you maybe are more familiar about this. But then one of the symptoms they started to see was the increased tissue redness and thorniness in the plant. And also the terminal part, the shoots were red, and there was a proliferation of shoots and elongation, like witch's broom that we call. And this was also, look, when you apply some chemicals like 2,4-D, you can produce these like a proliferation of the shoots in the terminal part of the shoots. So then, well, this I think is the dates were, but it's not too many years ago that it is have to start to see. That's reason I'm not sure if it has been seen in the West Coast. I don't think so yet. And this is the Rosa multiflora. And I think we have this Rosa multiflora. I have seen this around, but I haven't seen the disease. And when the disease progress, what the things is interesting is the leaves become smaller, the petals of the leaves are shortened, and most of the lateral buds produce, as I said, these intense red shoots. So I hope we won't get that disease, but I want to just to mention about a foliar problem in a plant. And what they have found, the vector of this virus is an area 5 mite. So these are the most microscopic mites that you can see, and it's really hard to see, but but we can use hand lens sometimes, but that is what they are identified as a vector of this virus. So just wanted to mention that to you, to you too. I think there's some question in the chat, or maybe no. Oh,
No, yeah, Eric just had to leave.
oh, Eric has to leave. Okay, that's okay. So what happened with this virus when it is attacking the roses that are cultivated? They produce succulent stems, a proliferation of thorns, but the symptoms are less severe than a multiflora rose. So just for you to be alert and aware what could happen if you see a rose, multiflora rose around here. As I say, I don't think it has been yet discovered in the West. All right, so just 2 slides next to summarize the best management practices. I know all of you know exactly this, but well, the main thing for all these fungal pathogens and most of the pathogens is reduce the leaf wetness. What, you know, if we have to, we do early irrigation, the foliage will dry quickly, so we can do that. Try to keep the humidity low level so we don't have conducive conditions for these pathogens. Enhance, you know, air circulation, and sometimes we can overcrowd our plants. If we can spread out, that would be a good practice. That's some key points that we always like to refer when we do these presentations. And as I always say, the cleaning and disinfecting is the best way to prevent. So anything that you can do to improve, to implement cultural practice, and, you know, use disinfectants, yes, but we cannot rely all the time in chemicals. If we do the process correctly, I'm sure we will reduce any inoculant populations to the lowest, so they don't cause too much damage. All the surfaces that are going to be in contact with the plants should be clean and disinfect. That would be the best protocols to follow, especially when you're doing propagation, things like that. And yeah, clean and organized will be always a best thing for me as a preventive action. And yeah, thank you. That has been a part of that. And I have a little quiz, 5 pictures. I want you to tell me what it is. But before that, just want to make you a reminder that we have still 2 more sessions to go, October and November for this year. And in October, we are planning to have kind of a hybrid session. We're going to see if there are some people that want to come, since we are now allowed to have in-person meetings. We're going to talk about identifying microscopes, microorganisms, maybe basic techniques, how to use a microscope, how to prepare slides. Somebody is interested in that. We are going to do that, working with that, preparing different specimens. We have different samples in the lab that we can do from pathogens, from water microorganisms, microalgae, cyanobacteria. We have everything that we can use as a source for this. So anyway, just keep in mind that we changed the day for October 28th. There is another meeting the previous week when we usually do our meetings, but that is the reason we need to reschedule. And yeah, keep thinking about topics. Please share with us if you think something that we haven't present during this year would be useful for you. Give us ideas. If this is something that we need to continue doing, that would be great. And if you can help us with some I'm sorry. Evaluation is really fast. You have your cell phone, you put in camera, you target this QR code, and you will get a link. And that is sure evaluation, right, Maria? You have any increased questions? Okay, that is super sure. And